Hey guys, tonight we're heading back in time to a medieval fortress where life unfolds in a slow, steady rhythm. Picture it, the stone walls, heavy and unyielding, stretching up to the sky like the arms of a giant. The air is thick with the earthy scent of timber and stone, mingling with the sharp chill of morning dew. Somewhere in the distance, a bell begins to toll, its deep, resonant sound echoing through the fortress, pulling the sleepy inhabitants from their dreams. The day's work is about to begin, and here's the kicker. You probably won't survive this. With no plumbing, no modern medicine, and enemies lurking on all sides, life in a medieval fortress was a constant battle for survival. But you get to live it vicariously through tonight's journey. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And, hey, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is over there. It's always fun to see how far our little stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The sun barely kisses the horizon as the fortress awakens from its slumber. The first sound that breaks the stillness is the deep tolling of the bell, its low chime reverberating across the battlements and winding its way down through the castle's stone halls. It's not a gentle ring, no, it's a commanding call. The fortress is awake, and so must its people be. As the bell sounds, those lucky enough to sleep within the inner keep are gently stirred from their beds, their stiff limbs protesting after a long, often restless night. And before you even think of hitting snooze, remember, there's no time for that here. The day must begin. Castle life isn't about leisurely mornings. Everything is timed, precise, and rooted in centuries-old tradition. As you wake up, the cool stone beneath your feet is a stark reminder of the fortress's unforgiving nature. The servants have already begun their day long before dawn, sweeping, cleaning, stoking the hearths. There's no place for laziness. After all, the castle runs like clockwork, and there's always work to be done. You shuffle through the stone halls, heading toward the Great Hall, where the early morning bustle can already be felt. The air is thick with the smell of firewood and warm bread. The sounds of conversation and movement fill the space, though it's still early enough that it's more about efficiency than chatter. There's a calm, steady rhythm to this life, a sense of order that makes the chaos of the outside world seem far away. You can hear the clink of metal as blacksmiths and armourers prepare their tools for the day ahead, each strike of their hammers setting the pace for another round of work. Historians still argue whether castles were ever truly peaceful places, considering the constant threat of attack and the ceaseless duty of the guards. But one thing's for sure, the early hours in a medieval fortress were about survival, getting everything prepared before the real challenges of the day began. By now, the household servants are already working in tandem, delivering food and drink to the noble family. They hurry through the hallways, heads down, efficient. There's little room for idleness. The social structure of the fortress demands it. The castle is a world unto itself, a microcosm of the medieval society that thrives within its walls. You could be a noble, a soldier, or a servant, but everyone has their place, and everyone contributes to the rhythm of castle life. Even the lowest-ranking servant knows there is no room for mistakes. One fascinating tidbit that may surprise you: there's a chance you could have been sleeping in a small box bed, a tiny private sleeping space in the Great Hall, if you didn't have your own quarters. These box beds were exactly what they sound like: small wooden frames with a mattress on top, curtained off for a bit of privacy. Not much space to stretch out, but it worked. The truly elite, of course, enjoyed private chambers with more comfort, but for many, the Great Hall was where it all went down. And what about the rest of the castle? Well, outside of the Great Hall, the rhythm of the day continues. Servants and soldiers alike start their morning routines, washing at the well, gathering firewood, or practicing swordplay in the courtyard. This is the time for the men and women of the fortress to check in with their work, their duties, and the castle's needs. Whether you're a noble, a knight, or a labourer, everyone plays their part in the day's unfolding. It's easy to romanticize the idea of medieval life, but the truth is it was a hard, unforgiving existence. You didn't wake up in a warm, soft bed, sipping coffee and scrolling through social media. No, you woke up to a world that demanded constant vigilance. A medieval fortress wasn't just a place of residence, it was a military stronghold, a beacon of power, and sometimes the last line of defence against marauders and invaders. As the day fully kicks into gear, you find yourself wandering the stone corridors of the fortress, taking in the sights and sounds that define this medieval world. The great hall is bustling with activity, but the deeper you go into the castle, the quieter it becomes. The rooms you pass are private, meant only for the most important figures of the household, the lord, the lady, and the occasional visiting dignitary. In this corner of the fortress, the hustle and bustle of the morning seem miles away, and the pace of life takes on a more deliberate, quiet rhythm. Each chamber holds its own secrets and stories, whispering of lives lived within these walls. The rooms within the keep are far more than just places to sleep. They're sanctuaries, filled with tapestries, books, and the smell of sweet herbs or burning incense. You can almost feel the contrast between the cold, hard stone of the outer walls and the warmth of these rooms, designed to offer comfort and protection from the harshness of the outside world. The chambers of the lord and lady are spacious, decorated with fine tapestries that tell stories of battles won and mythical creatures from far-off lands. And while the furnishings might be simple compared to what we might expect today, they're still a far cry from the harsh conditions of the common folk. Historians still debate how much the interiors of castles truly differed from one region to another. Some argue that in England, at least, these interiors were actually quite lavish by medieval standards, especially as the centuries wore on. Others suggest the truth was far less glamorous, with castles remaining utilitarian for much of their lifespan. Either way, the contrast between the living quarters of the nobles and those of the lower classes is glaring. While the lords may have enjoyed beds with canopies, wooden chests for storing personal belongings, and even rudimentary plumbing, the common folk were lucky to have a small, shared space in the Great Hall, or a tiny chamber with minimal comforts. But these spaces weren't just for sleeping, they were places where important decisions were made. In the chambers of the lord and lady, visitors came to seek counsel, discuss matters of governance, or perhaps strategize for upcoming battles. The daily life of the fortress's elite was heavily intertwined with the workings of the outside world, where politics, alliances, and power struggles could shift in an instant. So, while the noble family might enjoy relative comfort, their lives were anything but simple. As you walk through these rooms, you might notice the windows, narrow, almost arrow-slit openings, designed not for letting in sunlight, but for letting in the sight of any approaching threat. While the rooms inside were designed to offer protection and warmth, they were always mindful of the castle's role as a fortress, prepared for battle at any given moment. Even in the private chambers, you couldn't fully escape the ever-present awareness of the need for defence. In these moments, the castle reveals itself as something more than just a home. It's a living, breathing entity that adapts to its surroundings, evolving as the demands of war and peace shift the tides of history. Each space, each room is a piece of the greater whole, contributing to the fortress's role in both daily life and in the larger struggle for power and security. The noble chambers may seem like a world apart from the lower levels of the castle, but they are still deeply connected. In these rooms, you might notice items that speak to the interconnectedness of life within the fortress. A family heirloom passed down through generations, a set of weapons hung on the wall as both decoration and reminder, or perhaps a bowl of fruit, though a rare indulgence, symbolizing the wealth and privilege of the noble class. Then there's the courtyard, where the day's work continues in full swing. Soldiers, knights, and men-at-arms are already hard at work, maintaining weapons, practicing their swordplay, and readying themselves for whatever challenges may come. The fortress's military strength is as much a part of its daily rhythm as any other function, and it's clear from the activity in the courtyard that this is a place where preparedness is key. It's easy to forget that the castle wasn't just a home or a symbol of wealth. It was, in many ways, a war machine. Its walls were designed to withstand sieges, its gates to repel invaders, and its people to stand ready to fight at a moment's notice. The servants, too, were often trained in some measure of defence, because in a world constantly on edge, no one could afford to be unprepared. So as the castle's residents continue to go about their daily routines, whether they're in the lord's chambers, the soldiers' barracks, or the kitchens, it's all happening under the ever-watchful eye of the fortress itself. The castle is not just a backdrop to daily life, it's an active, breathing participant in the lives of those within its walls. The fortress is alive with a quiet, calculated energy, and as the morning stretches on, the mood shifts. The noble chambers may have their own sense of peace and luxury, but here, on the stone-lined training grounds, the air is thick with purpose. The courtyard is filled with the clang of metal on metal, the steady rhythm of swords striking shields, and the grunts of men training for what could be the next battle. The soldiers, knights, and men-at-arms are already deep into their practice, working tirelessly to perfect their combat skills and maintain their strength. For them, there's no such thing as a day off. You could be one of them, a soldier whose day revolves around the art of war. You wake up before dawn, long before the bell in the great hall signals the rest of the fortress to stir. By the time the sun breaks over the horizon, you're already at your post, checking your gear, sharpening your sword, and preparing for the drills ahead. The castle may seem like a place of comfort and wealth from the inside, but to the soldiers who protect it, it's a place of duty and vigilance. The training is grueling. There's no time to waste. Every strike, every maneuver must be perfected. Historians still argue about the intensity of medieval training regimens, but it's widely agreed that the knights and soldiers who trained in the courtyards weren't just working out for show. They were preparing for the possibility of battle at any given moment. In fact, many soldiers spent more time in the courtyard than in any other part of the castle. It was their world, and everything outside of it, the food, the comforts, the luxuries, was a secondary concern. But the military life wasn't all about practice. In fact, much of a soldier's life in a medieval fortress revolved around maintaining readiness. Weapons had to be maintained, armour had to be repaired, and supplies had to be checked. The sound of blacksmiths hammering away at swords and armour in the castle's smithy is as common as the chatter of servants in the hallways. These men, who spend their days making sure the warriors are ready for anything, understand better than anyone that battle isn't just won by brute strength. It's won by preparation, discipline, and a keen sense of awareness. The sword is perhaps the most iconic weapon of the medieval soldier, but in the hands of a skilled knight, it's an extension of the body itself, as much a part of them as their own limbs. The knight's sword is a symbol of status and power, but it's also a tool of survival. In the courtyard, you see knights practicing their combat stances, working to hone their precision in every move. Every slice of the blade through the air tells a story of training, hardship, and a life lived under the shadow of constant threat. For the rest of the castle's inhabitants, the military life isn't as front and centre, but they can still hear the clanging of swords and the thud of arrows hitting targets in the distance. It's a reminder, always, that the fortress is as much a military stronghold as it is a home. The threat of attack is never far from anyone's mind. As you continue your stroll through the courtyard, you might catch a glimpse of the archery range in the far corner, where soldiers are practicing their aim. Archery was a key skill for those defending the castle, and a well-aimed arrow could mean the difference between life and death. While the knights practiced their swordplay, the archers focused on accuracy and speed. With the right combination of skill and strength, an archer could take down an opponent from a distance, a crucial advantage during a siege. But it's not just about battle. There's a camaraderie here too among the soldiers. They eat together, sleep in shared barracks, and train side by side, building a bond that is forged in both sweat and necessity. Some might argue that this was the true strength of medieval armies. Not just the armour and weapons they wielded, but the unspoken connection between soldiers, forged in the quiet moments between drills. And then there's the ever-present tension of waiting. The soldiers are always on edge, even when they're not actively training. The castle's walls, while seemingly impenetrable, are constantly being scanned for signs of danger. Every sentry posted along the battlements is keenly aware that the peace of the fortress can be shattered in an instant. Sometimes there's a waiting game, days, weeks, even months of relative peace, followed by the sudden explosive chaos of battle. It's the uncertainty that keeps everyone alert, and the fortress itself seems to echo this sentiment. It stands tall and proud, but always aware that its protection is temporary. It's an odd contradiction. Inside the walls, there's a rhythm to the day that feels steady, even peaceful. But outside those walls, the world is constantly shifting. The soldiers know this better than anyone. The drills, the maintenance, the vigilance, they're all part of the delicate balance between life and death in a medieval fortress. And for the men and women who live within these walls, it's a rhythm they must follow every day. As the day unfolds, you find yourself transitioning from the military drills of the courtyard to the quieter, often overlooked life within the fortress, where survival depends on labour, skill, and a different kind of expertise. Away from the swords and shields, the blacksmiths are already hard at work. Their anvils ring out with the sound of their hammers as they shape metal, forging the tools and weapons that are integral to the castle's survival. These craftsmen are just as vital as the knights. Without them, the entire fortress would falter. The blacksmith's forge is the heartbeat of the castle, and you can feel the warmth radiating from it as you pass by, the smell of burning coal and metal thick in the air. Historians still debate whether blacksmithing in the Middle Ages was more art than function, but one thing is certain: it was an essential craft. The finest swords, the strongest horseshoes, the most reliable ploughs, all of them came from the blacksmith's hands. His forge was both a place of creation and a symbol of the castle's self-sufficiency. After all, in an age where supply chains were rudimentary at best, relying on a local blacksmith for nearly every tool or weapon was a necessity, not a luxury. Beyond the blacksmith's forge, the labour of survival extends throughout the entire fortress. The kitchens are already bustling as the cooks prepare meals for the castle's inhabitants. The scent of roasting meat and fresh bread fills the air, and you can hear the clattering of pots and pans as the servants hustle to prepare the day's fare. This may seem like a simple task, but feeding the entire castle is no small feat. The kitchen workers are skilled in the art of large-scale cooking, able to feed an entire army if need be. The noble family may have access to finer foods, tender cuts of meat, sweet fruits, and delicate pastries, but for the rest of the fortress's residents, meals are much simpler. Stews, bread, and dried meats are staples of the common diet, and they're made in large quantities to feed everyone who calls the castle home. The castle's kitchen is a surprisingly busy place, with staff working in tandem to produce meals at all hours of the day. The lead cook, a gruff but skilled individual, runs the show with a practiced hand. There's no room for mistakes here. If the food doesn't come out right, the entire day's rhythm can be thrown off. And when you're feeding a couple hundred people, that's not a risk anyone is willing to take. The castle's food supply is more than just a matter of luxury. It's a matter of survival. During times of war or siege, the food stockpile is the lifeblood of the fortress. The kitchens become even more critical, as every meal could be the difference between life and death. The labour of survival doesn't stop at the blacksmith's forge and the kitchens. Outside, the fields surrounding the castle are constantly tended by farmers and labourers who grow the crops that feed the inhabitants. These workers rise early, just as the bell tolls for the rest of the castle, and they spend their days in the fields planting, harvesting, and tending to the animals. These farms are the foundation of the castle's food supply, and without them, the fortress would be nothing more than a cold, empty shell. The men and women who work the land are often overlooked, but without their labour, the castle would starve. It's a quiet, essential kind of work that goes largely uncelebrated, yet it keeps the castle alive. And then there's the castle's water supply, which, like the food supply, is a crucial aspect of daily life. The well is perhaps one of the most important places in the entire fortress, providing water for cooking, cleaning, and drinking. The water carrier, a role often filled by a young servant, is responsible for ensuring the water supply is plentiful and clean. It may seem like a small task, but during a siege or in times of drought, the water carrier becomes a hero in their own right. Without a steady supply of fresh water, the fortress would be doomed. These essential workers, blacksmiths, cooks, farmers, and water carriers, are the unsung heroes of medieval fortress life. While the soldiers and nobles may get the most attention, it's the labourers who ensure the castle stays operational. They are the gears that keep the machine running smoothly, and without them, the fortress would quickly fall apart. The quiet hum of the daily grind is the true heartbeat of the castle, and it's a rhythm that continues unceasingly day after day. Historians still argue about the role of the labourer in the medieval world. Some suggest they were treated as little more than tools, while others believe their importance was recognised in ways that we don't fully understand today. But one thing is clear, these workers were indispensable. Whether you were a blacksmith, a cook, or a farmer, you were a vital part of the fortress's survival. Without the labour of these men and women, the castle's very existence would be in jeopardy. As you move deeper into the fortress, the day's rhythm shifts from the visible labour of survival to the more hidden, almost secretive spaces that lie within its walls. These are the places that most people never see, the chambers and passages that serve a very different purpose than the grand halls and courtyards, tucked away in forgotten corners behind hidden doors or beneath the castle itself, are secret spaces designed for defence, secrecy, and escape. The first thing you notice as you step into these hidden areas is the change in atmosphere. It's cooler here, the air stale and heavy with the scent of damp stone. These parts of the fortress were built not for comfort or grandeur, but for a far more practical reason, to ensure the castle could withstand a siege or even a covert attack. These underground passages, hidden chambers, and escape tunnels are the lifeblood of a fortress under siege. The lords and ladies of the castle might enjoy a life of relative comfort during peaceful times, but when the enemy comes knocking, these secret spaces become the only refuge. It's hard to imagine what it must have felt like to know these tunnels existed beneath your feet, just out of sight. Some of the passages were designed to connect the castle to the outside world, allowing for a quick escape or an undetected entry. Others led to wells and water sources hidden from enemy hands, and some were simply designed as safe havens, places where the castle's inhabitants could retreat in the event of an attack. Historians still argue over how frequently these secret spaces were used. Some suggest that, for much of medieval history, castles were largely immune to attack, and these hidden rooms were little more than a precaution. Others believe that castles were constantly under threat, and these secretive areas were used more often than we might think. One thing's for sure, even when they weren't in use, the mere knowledge that these spaces existed created a sense of security. It was the kind of quiet, unspoken protection that allowed the castle's residents to go about their daily lives without fear. At least, not until the enemy showed up. The tunnels that connect the castle's various secret rooms and escape routes are often narrow, winding, and dimly lit, if at all. It's easy to get lost in these passages, where every turn looks the same and every step echoes with the sound of your own footsteps. The walls, covered in centuries of dust and grime, seem to whisper of past owners, long gone but never forgotten. If you close your eyes for a moment, you can almost hear the soft shuffle of feet, the quiet movement of those who knew the castle's hidden spaces well. In addition to the tunnels, the fortress might also have had a network of concealed rooms, sometimes hidden behind false walls or beneath the floorboards of the lord's chambers. These rooms served a variety of functions, from storage spaces for valuable treasures and weapons to chambers where the lord and his family could retreat in times of danger. But perhaps the most interesting hidden space of all was the castle's prison. Often located in the deepest, darkest part of the castle, the prison was a place of isolation, reserved for those who had either betrayed the castle or were unfortunate enough to fall victim to its darker politics. The prison in a medieval fortress was not a place for luxury. The cold, damp cells, often with no windows, were reserved for the most undesirable of guests. Prisoners were often left in total darkness, shackled to the stone floor, their only company the sound of their own breathing. Some castles even had oubliettes, a terrifying form of dungeon where prisoners were dropped into a deep pit, never to be seen again. These were dark times, and the prison was a constant reminder that justice in the medieval world was swift and often brutal. While these hidden spaces of secrecy and escape were vital to the fortress's defense, they also served as a reminder of the ever-present danger surrounding those who lived within the walls. It's easy to forget just how precarious life could be in a medieval fortress. For the nobility, the everyday rhythm of life was often lived in luxury, but the ever-present threat of invasion, rebellion or betrayal was always just beneath the surface. For the labourers, the soldiers, and even the lords themselves, these hidden spaces represented an insurance policy, a way to survive when the world outside the castle walls turned hostile. And though most of the time the fortress might seem like a peaceful, self-sufficient community, it was always on edge, always ready for the worst. The secret spaces underfoot were a constant reminder that, when it came to survival, it was better to be prepared than to be caught unawares. As the sun begins its slow descent, casting a golden glow across the castle, the rhythm of the day shifts once more, this time toward a far more luxurious and essential aspect of medieval life: meals and feasts. In a medieval fortress, food was not just about sustenance. It was a reflection of the castle's wealth, its standing in the world, and its ability to maintain power. And let's face it, after a day of physical labour, military drills, and tense vigilance, everyone was ready for a good meal. Inside the kitchen, the fire burns brightly, the air thick with the scent of roasting meats, fresh bread, and herbs. The cooks are at work, preparing meals that range from the humble stews for the common folk to elaborate banquets fit for the nobility. While the commoners settle for bread, dried meats, and perhaps a vegetable stew, the upper classes enjoy far more indulgent fare: poultry, venison, fish, and the finest fruits. For the wealthy, the meal isn't just a necessity, it's a show of wealth and power. The more extravagant the meal, the more the castle's lord could flaunt his position to visitors and potential rivals. Historians still debate the nutritional value of a medieval banquet, with some arguing that these feasts were as much about spectacle as they were about food. After all, when you have the power to provide a table full of exotic fruits, fine wines, and game meats, it's not just a dinner, it's a statement. The spices that came from distant lands, the delicate pastries that were more art than food, and the abundance of sweet desserts, these were all signs of a household's wealth. And if you were one of the lucky guests to dine at the lord's table, you were part of something far grander than just a meal. You were witnessing power in action. The Great Hall, where all meals were served, is now alive with anticipation. Long wooden tables are being set, heavy goblets placed in front of each seat. The servants hurry about, moving dishes from the kitchen to the hall, their hands full with the bounty of the day's harvest. This room is more than just a dining area. It's the heart of the castle's social life. Here, the Lord holds court, making decisions about the running of the castle, passing down judgment, or receiving guests. Everything happens in the great hall, from the formal to the informal, from business to pleasure. When the meal finally arrives, it's often a feast for the senses. The Lord and his family sit at the high table, their servants and closest allies gathered around them. The food is passed around, and the air fills with the sounds of chatter, laughter, and the clinking of goblets. The nobility take their time, savouring each course, enjoying the opportunity to mingle with guests or exchange gossip about the latest political developments. But for the common folk, the feast is more than just a social event. It's a rare chance to enjoy an indulgence, to eat food that isn't just sustenance, but a treat. One thing that might surprise you, the quality of the food served to the castle's nobles was highly dependent on the season. In the winter months, when fresh produce was scarce, they relied heavily on preserved foods, salted meats, dried fish, pickled vegetables, and fruits stored in barrels. During the summer, the bounty of the land, fresh vegetables, herbs, and fruits, made its way onto the table, and for the wealthy, that meant a wider array of indulgent dishes. However, this feast wasn't just about food, it was about control. A lord who could host a lavish banquet, filled with fine wines and rare delicacies, was a lord who could show his wealth, his connections, and his ability to control resources. For the common folk, however, the daily meals were far simpler, often consisting of bread, ale, and perhaps some cheese or porridge. While the lords enjoyed the luxury of variety, the labourers and soldiers were not so fortunate. Their meals were practical, designed for sustenance rather than pleasure. But even these simple meals had an important role to play. The shared act of eating together in the great hall was one of the few communal experiences within the fortress. It reinforced the sense of unity, of a collective purpose among the workers, soldiers, and servants. It wasn't all about the food, though. The social dynamics of these feasts were just as important as the meal itself. For the Lord, it was a chance to solidify alliances, build rapport with allies, and keep an eye on potential rivals. After all, when you control the food, you control the power. And for those attending, the feast was a subtle reminder of where they stood in the social hierarchy. Whether you were a noble or a servant, the seating arrangement, the food you ate, and the people you mingled with all communicated your status. Even with all the grandeur, a medieval feast wasn't just an escape from the labour of the day. It was, in its own way, another form of labour. The kitchen staff worked tirelessly to prepare the meals, the servants scurried to serve them, and the noble host spent hours maintaining the delicate balance of social interactions. And, of course, no one really mentions the aftermath, the piles of dishes to wash, the cleaning of the great hall, and the quiet return to the day's tasks after the revelry ends. As the evening begins to close in and the feast comes to a close, there's a sense of quiet satisfaction in the air. The castle has come alive, first through the work of its labourers, then through the intense military drills of its soldiers, and now through the vibrant exchange of food, conversation, and power. And as the last crumbs are swept away and the final goblets emptied, there's only the gentle hum of contentment, at least until tomorrow's challenges arrive. As night settles over the castle, the rhythm of the day slows, but doesn't stop. There's a distinct shift in energy. The once bustling halls now echo with quieter sounds, the distant chatter of servants tidying up, the soft clink of armour being removed, the low murmur of the Lord's family winding down from the day's activities. The grand feast may have ended, but for many the night has just begun. As the evening sets in, there's a ritual to the winding down of castle life, The gates are closed and barred, and the drawbridge is pulled up to secure the fortress. The guards begin their patrols, walking the battlements with a watchful eye. From their posts high above, they look out over the lands, scanning the dark horizon for any signs of movement. It's an eerie, almost haunting task, one that can stretch long into the night. The castle may seem peaceful under the dim light of the torches, but there's always a sense of vigilance. The stillness is deceptive. You know that just beyond the walls, anything could be waiting. The rest of the castle is winding down in its own way. The servants gather in the kitchens to finish their work, clearing away the remnants of the feast and preparing for the next day. The soldiers in the barracks are settling in, removing their armour, cleaning their weapons, and sharing quiet stories about their day. Some might talk about their drills, while others reflect on the news of the realm, discussing the politics, alliances, and conflicts that might one day bring them back to the battlefield. In the Lord's chambers, the family begins to retire for the night, the heavy doors of their rooms closing softly behind them. The castle's noble family might enjoy a warm fire in their private rooms, perhaps a last drink of wine, and the quiet luxury of rest. Their chambers are dimly lit, and you can imagine them lounging on their cushioned chairs, speaking softly in the privacy of their own space, reflecting on the events of the day. For them, this time of the evening is a respite from the formalities of court and the pressures of leadership. Yet, even in this quiet, there's always something that needs attention, perhaps a letter that needs to be sent, a strategy to be considered, or a matter of governance that cannot wait until morning. The lord or lady might receive visitors in the late hours, advisors seeking counsel or vassals paying respect. It's a never-ending cycle of responsibility, a rhythm that persists even as the rest of the castle goes to bed. For the rest of the castle's inhabitants, sleep comes more quickly. The servants find a place to rest in the hallways or shared rooms, while the guards on the lower levels settle into their barracks, where they'll sleep in shifts. The soldiers and labourers, exhausted from the day's toil, fall into a deep sleep, knowing that tomorrow will demand even more of their energy. The noise of the castle quiets significantly as the night deepens, and soon only the soft sounds of the wind or distant animals can be heard outside. But there's one last ritual that marks the end of the day, the changing of the guard. As the night stretches on, a new shift of guards takes their place, taking over the watch from their comrades. This is perhaps one of the most important parts of the evening. The fortress's security relies on the vigilance of these night watchmen, who patrol the walls and listen for any signs of danger. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation, as everyone knows that in times of war or unrest, the guards are the first line of defence. Historians still argue about the role of the night guard in medieval fortresses. Some suggest that the security measures in place were fairly robust, while others believe that castles were more vulnerable than we think. The presence of the night watchman, however, was a constant reassurance for the castle's residents. Even in the dead of night, there were eyes watching, making sure that no threat could slip through the cracks. As the night wears on, the castle begins to settle into its rhythm of silence. The torches flicker, casting long shadows against the stone walls, and the night air is filled with a chill that only the thick walls of the fortress can keep at bay. Inside, the castle sleeps, but even in sleep, it remains ever watchful, ever ready for whatever the morning may bring. And so, life in a medieval fortress continues, a never-ending cycle of vigilance, labour, luxury, and quiet moments of rest. From dawn until dusk, every part of the castle plays its role, from the soldiers in the courtyard to the servants in the kitchen, from the lord's private chambers to the hidden tunnels deep beneath the ground. The fortress is more than just a building. It's a living, breathing entity, one that relies on the constant rhythm of its inhabitants to keep it functioning. The same rhythm that brings it to life during the day carries it through the night, until tomorrow's bell rings once again, signalling the beginning of another day. The night inside the fortress grows stiller by the minute, and as the hours stretch, the once animated castle becomes a place of quiet shadows. The sounds of labour, of swords clashing, and meals being prepared are distant now, softened by time and the weight of the stone that holds them all in place. There's a profound sense of peace as the castle settles into its nighttime rhythm, each section of it slumbering in its own way, preparing for the duties of tomorrow. But just as the moon casts its silver light on the outer walls, there's a quiet hum of something eternal about this place, a sense that the castle itself is alive, breathing in tandem with the lives of those who reside within. As you rest your head against the cold stone of the battlements, or settle into a small alcove of your own, you might feel the weight of centuries pressing down around you. The same stone that has withstood countless sieges, the same walls that have kept countless generations safe, now hold you in place. Time here moves differently. It's not about rushing forward to the next moment. It's about existing in the rhythms of survival, of labour, of life. You can almost hear the soft breathing of the soldiers in their barracks, the rustling of the servants as they take their brief moments of rest, and the distant crackling of the fire in the hearths that continue to glow. In the Lord's chambers, there is the occasional murmur of conversation, perhaps about a decision that cannot wait, but for the most part, the castle is at peace. Even the night watchmen, pacing the battlements in their endless vigilance, seem quieter now. The fortress is safe for the moment, and the only sound left is the wind whispering through the cracks in the stone, carrying with it the secrets of ages long past. For the common folk, especially those who sleep in the great hall or tucked away in small chambers on the lower levels, this is the most restful time. The labour of the day has been completed, the feasts enjoyed, and the evening's socialising has faded into sleep. In these quiet hours, the people of the castle can dream, albeit with the awareness that the next day will demand more. But for now, there's only the calm of night. You can almost sense the collective exhale of the fortress, the way the castle itself seems to breathe in and out, like a giant resting after a long, hard day. Historians still argue about the true nature of medieval castle life, questioning how much of it was shaped by the fears of attack and how much by the rhythms of daily existence. Some suggest that the anxiety of constant defence cast a shadow over everything, while others believe that life within these walls, despite the external threats, was filled with quiet moments of peace and community. In the end, it's clear that life in a medieval fortress was both a tense and peaceful existence, a paradox that held true until the last flicker of light was extinguished. As the hours pass, the castle seems to sink deeper into its slumber. Even the torches outside the castle walls burn low, casting their last flickers of light before darkness fully claims the land. This is the moment when the castle seems to hold its breath, preparing for whatever the dawn will bring. Tomorrow, the routine will begin again. The bell will toll, the soldiers will train, the cooks will prepare the meals, and the labourers will tend to the castle's needs. But for now, there's only the silence and the promise of another day. It's a quiet reminder that, while the castle is a place of power and defence, it is also a place of life. Its walls, heavy with history, continue to protect and support the people who live within them. The rituals of the day, whether of work, meals, or socialising, are what make this fortress more than just stone. It's a living, breathing world, constantly adapting to its surroundings, yet remaining anchored in the past. Even in the darkest hours of the night, there's a rhythm to it, a constant steady pulse. And so, as you drift off into sleep, you can feel the presence of the fortress around you, the stones, the walls, the memories. The rhythms of this life, its quiet daily cycle, are etched into the very fabric of the place. The next day will arrive soon enough, and with it the same familiar patterns will unfold. But for now, there's nothing but the peace of the night.